Welcome to the Multifamily Collective. I feel like this week's guest on the Multifamily Collective needs no introduction. His reputation rather, precedes him out in the multifamily space, especially on LinkedIn, where he is very actively involved. But Dom Beveridge, the principal at 2420, has released a new white paper. It's called Visual Revolution: How Digital Mapping is Unifying Multifamily Experiences in Data Analysis. Now, Dom and I caught up and we talked about this paper, and we tried to share, or Dom tried to share, based on my prompts and hopefully fairly good questioning, with very specific stories about how this technology, visualization and digitization, mapping, if you will, the interior spaces in communities at large, how that is benefiting organizations out in the marketplace, how that technology is being administered and baked into several of the offerings, several vendor supplier offerings in the space today, and how it could really revolutionize multifamily as we move forward. A lot of this is based on sensor technologies, but a lot of it is based on other types of technologies that are baked into an overarching platform. We name some names. We certainly draw from the industry as it relates to stories that you can take away. You can take away actionable items that you can incorporate into your own organization, your own business, and hopefully create more efficiency, more effectiveness. You can use data to make more well-informed decisions. And by visualizing that data, you can make them potentially more rapidly. So as it is tradition, grab your favorite beverage today. I am that sounds weird. I am consuming branded from Free Reign Coffee. This has become my favorite coffee brand, and branded is a fantastic blend to pick up. So with that being said, please enjoy this well-rounded conversation with Dom Beveridge. Dom, welcome to the show.
Good to be back.
Yes, you are back for, I think, the fourth or the fifth time. I opened up my my Dom Beveridge research folder, and it's full of 20 for 20s, and it's full of my notes that I take from the 20s for 20s, and it's starting to get a lot of megabytes.
Yeah, no, they're getting. This one in particular is rich in pictures, so lots of yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, as always, I do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to invest a little bit with us here at Multifamily Collective. Certainly, our listeners and our viewers. This conversation, I'm very excited about this. I think it probably would be good for us to sort of set context. As we were talking offline, it's a complex conversation. I think that can only be unpacked by the stories you tell in your latest paper. So maybe introduce the paper, but then provide us a little bit of context so that we can unpack it through the stories you tell in the paper.
Yeah. So the basic idea is that software is getting more visual, right? So if you think about, there are more and more applications that help you find your way around a property, that tell you stuff about the physical space, that allow you to go look for units within a community. There are more and more applications of that as we lay out examples in the paper. But at the same time, and this is the sort of subtle point, but the thing that I think is incredibly cool about this is that there is more and more value in having this single digital record of the physical property, right? So if you think about a multifamily community, you think about all of the information that we keep on a multifamily property, right? If we in our PMS, we've got unit numbers, and we've got some information that somebody typed in about unit numbers in our PMS.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the richest source of data about something like multifamily, where the location of stuff is really important. Like it's important to understand, where this unit is in relation to all of the other stuff in the property. It's important to know where all of the stuff is in an individual unit. So if you think about the growing number of different applications, for which information about the physical property is useful. And we're going to come on and I hope talk in detail about the many different examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, having a source of data that's sort of definitive about the property, which is going to take the form of something like a digital map, is increasingly important, because it means that you can share more and more information between more and more potential things that use it, across many different things that add value to the real estate that you're managing. That sounds like a very sort of theoretical idea. The reason why we chose in the paper to tell the story through examples, like really specific examples of maintenance, of leasing, of analytics, and so on, is because I think it's easiest to understand this concept through the various ways that people use it. But just the important thing to keep in mind is the real point that I'm very excited about the paper is about how all of these things work together.
Yeah, it's, what it brings to mind for me is you sort of got this. I think in the paper you describe it as a ledger. I'm missing the rest of that piece, but it's almost like you've taken this physical location and you've inventoried every single aspect of that physical location in order to enrich whatever experiences are born out of that, be it the team member, the customer, the investor, the operator, the asset manager, and so on and so forth. So now you have this full digital archive, right, of data that you can then use to make decisions. Is that a fair way to say that?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you think about, you could improve maintenance by simply putting a picture of something into an application, right? So if I'm going to fulfill a work order, and it's important to me to figure out which sink is blocked, and there are multiple sinks in an apartment. So if I'm going to unblock a sink, which sink is it, right? So just simply knowing where the stuff is in a unit adds some value. But then if you think about there are multiple different kinds of service application for whom that information is also valuable. So, one of the examples that we talk about is water sensors, right? Kairos is one of the companies that very kindly contributed to this paper. When Kairos fits a property for leak detection, or your water issue detection, leak detection, I think is too narrow to describe what they do. But when they fit out a property, they put something like 1,200 individual sensors into that
Right.
property. Well, now you've got another piece of information that's potentially really useful if I'm doing maintenance. So the idea of, instead of just let's push a picture into the maintenance app, if you have one definitive map where the maintenance team and the stuff that's in the Kairos app are sort of available for whoever needs to use it, now you're running things more efficiently than you otherwise would. And if you think it's going to be more and more the case that we do more and more stuff that relates to the physical, we train AI to tell us stuff about, or to tell our prospects stuff about the property. Many different things that require that we have information very easily available. You start to see what we mean when we introduce this concept in the paper of the ledger for the physical property, right? So in the same way that the ledger in in your PMS captures all of your costs and all of your revenue items, for the physical property, where is the stuff in this property? Where is all the information about the distance from A to B? That ledger should take the form of a digital map, a comprehensive digital map. The objective of which is we want to hold all of the information about this property that's useful to anyone who's interested in finding it out.
And to play off of that example that you're using about the service team member, and let's say a sink, and let's say Kairos, and they have sensors all over the property, it's not a stretch to think that, and we've talked about self-diagnosing mechanics in the past, be it stoves, refrigerators, dishwashers, etc. But but you have this hidden space behind the walls, right? You have drains, you have supply lines, you have different things that are buried in the walls. But with leak detection or some sort of sensor mechanism, if I have a drain in my sink and it starts to get clogged, it's
Mhm.
probably right to think in the past we have to wait until we have a little bit of a flood or something. But in the future, the sensor will help us anticipate a potential service request and go take care of a problem before it becomes a real problem. And that's enabled by what you're talking about here. Is that fair
Yeah.
to say?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the example that Kairos used in the paper was of how you diagnose problems, because you can tell that their architecture, their sensors communicate through these portals. If you can watch patterns associated with sensors. Now, if you imagine you were looking at a report that took the form of a list,
Yeah.
that can tell you a certain amount about what information the sensors are giving you. When you look at it on a map and the sensors are sort of grouped together, you can tell what's actually going on. So I think they use the example of
Yeah.
this is not, this set of data does not tell us that there's a problem with the leak. It tells us that there's a problem with the communication hub that that the sensors are connected to. So
Yeah.
by looking at the stuff on a map, you can immediately and intuitively tell what's going on. Do I need to send a maintenance tech to that, or do I have some other issue with this? And yeah, that's the kind of thing that you're able to do when you visualize this stuff.
Sticking in the maintenance vein, there's another example in the paper. Jindu from HappyCo was talking about a heat map. I think you actually have a picture in the paper of a heat map. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that heat map is telling a property operator and how they can use that information to take action?
Yeah, you see this in an increasing number of analytical tools and maintenance apps, where it's really beneficial to know geographically where stuff is going
Mm-hmm.
on, right? So I think we used the example of if you look at the accumulation of work orders to
Yeah,
do
that's
with
right.
HVAC in a property, if you look at it on something like a heat map, you might observe that okay, the reason why we've got all these work orders is to do with the fact that the sun is on this side of the building
Yeah,
at this particular time of day. Like you get very sort of intuitive explanations of why these work orders are coming about. So rather than just sending people to these individual units that say they've got an issue with their air conditioning, you actually know what's causing this, and that's going to cause you to treat this problem differently.
right. You might plant some shade trees so you don't have your condensing units instead of spending
Right.
tons and tons of dollars on. Um,
Yeah.
let's let's switch gears a little bit. I imagine so. We talked a little bit about maintenance. In terms of a prospect journey, somebody who's out looking for an apartment. Um, is this visualization of data helpful to the consumer, or is it helpful to the marketer, say pricing and revenue person, as it relates to marketing to that person? Talk to us about how the visualization helps in that arena.
Yeah, well, I mean, we used a couple of examples in the paper. Like it's interesting. Bazzuto, as you
Mhm.
would expect, had some really great insights in terms of marketing. Like in particular, they share some of the results of the testing that they did that sort of shows how, when you give people these visualizations, you give people the opportunity to do things like unit level search. You increase the engagement on on the site. You generally
Yeah.
want people to spend more time looking at their options on your site, and it definitely seems to help. It definitely seems to help with that. One of the if you sort of think about the other example was Jonah, one of the designers
Mhm.
of multifamily websites. And the interesting thing that Yuri, the CEO, shared, he contextualized everything in terms of how this relates to conversions, right? The story was very much about, the website as a way of managing your funnel, right? So bringing the maximum number of people in and then getting the maximum number of them to convert. And the examples that they used were that they showed me, and that we included a screenshot from them in the actual paper. But the examples they were showing were companies that had put a lot of like really rich data on the site. Again, your objective is you're trying to answer every question that the prospect has and get them to the point where they're ready to book the tour, and they're well qualified when they book it. But the thing that he was saying about this interactive map search, he used a very good simile for this. He was talking about when you go to the mall, right? If you're going to these stores which give you all of these options, they merchandise their stuff really well, but when you walk into the mall, you don't know. You want to go buy something specific, or you want to go look for something specific. You don't know where to go, so you look for the "You Are Here" map.
That's right.
in the mall, and in I don't know, at some of the nicer malls, they've got like nice interactive touchscreen things that tell you, enable you to like search for stuff and tell you exactly where to go. He likened the unit level search to that. So he was saying that if you think about these websites that are really geared towards conversion, they're the equivalent of the store, with its storefront and its merchandising and the way it's all set up to try and get you to buy stuff. And the unit level search he likened to the "You Are Here" map in the store. Like you're trying to orientate people towards the thing that they want, which I think is quite a useful way to look at it in terms of marketing. We wrote, and the last paper that we published with Engrain last year was about how a unit level search changes websites, right? And you sort of think about the sort of Zillow search for a home. You're looking for you're searching the market for homes that fit your criteria, your budget, your minimum room count, or whatever amenities you have to have. And the thesis of that paper is that apartments have to go the same way, right? In multifamily, we have that bias of, because we're, ultimately how we develop these communities tends to influence how we think about the market overall. We tend to think about the unit as this thing that's inside this building, which is the main thing that we think about. But the reality is, when you're looking for a home, I'm more interested in the unit than I am in the building, right? So the idea of you ultimately have to go to a model where people can more quickly find what apartment homes are available in the locations that I'm interested in living in, right? And which building that apartment happens to be in is of secondary importance, not primary importance as we tend to think about it. And what Yuri was saying about that element of website design is really consistent with that. You're looking for the unit level search to orientate you towards the things that you need to know to make a great decision about which apartments you want to go view.
It's interesting how much influence consumers have based on the influence that big companies put on them, right? The Apples, the Amazons, the Ubers of the world. They influence consumer behavior, and then consumers by default want the apartment shopping experience, or any experience in the apartment world, multifamily world, to mimic the outside world, these bigger companies, right? And what I hear you saying is that consumers are really influencing I don't really like the word frictionless, but it really comes down to fewer clicks, fewer steps, fewer have to do this, have to do that. I just want to get information in a really pragmatic, logical sequence that has the least amount of steps so I can get to what I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you're describing is liquid expectations, right? So, the fact that I book a flight and check into it and have my boarding pass and everything on my phone, influences how I think about things like leasing, for example. Like
Yeah.
people expect the same thing, equivalent service that they purchase, right? So if you think about booking restaurants, or you think about booking hotels, I mean, it's kind of infrequently the case now that if you're booking something that you're not currently familiar with, you quite seldom do it without some reference to a map now. You wouldn't book a hotel in a city that you're unfamiliar with without figuring out where it is in relation to what I'm going to do. I mean, like the most frustrating things on websites for me, this might be a generational thing, but the most frustrating thing for me is when I can't find the map icon on on a booking site. Now that may be that I'm just not that good at intuitively figuring out where it's supposed to be, but it does tell me that it's a really big impediment to making decisions about anything if I can't quickly find where the map is.
Yeah, that's right. Quick sidebar before we go on to the next question. It's interesting to me how many times I go to Google Maps to do my search for just about anything, like this thing near me, right? Or this, whatever it is I'm trying to do in terms of commerce is really driven by the map, not necessarily by websites anymore. Maybe that's my own personal behavior, but I have to imagine a lot of people shop that way or search that
For
way
sure.
rather.
For sure.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, so a number of years ago, you and I talked about AI powered leasing consultants. At the time, we were using a technology called Lisa. I think this might be 4 or 5 years ago now. Time really flies. But is there, in that context, AI leasing agents, and is there sort of a segue or a collision point between that and this digital map enhancing, or what we're talking about here? Is there a sort of a nice hand in glove relationship between those two things?
There really is, and this was one of my favorite use cases in the paper, right? So the thing that we describe, we use the example of Elise AI, who everybody's familiar with.
Right.
Something I did not realize that they were doing is they are training their model with map information. Now that's a really, really cool thing to do, and I suspect it's a nice foreshadowing of something that I suspect is going to get really common in our technology. So if I think if we look at the specific examples that they shared in the course of this interview, well, we talked at the start of the conversation about this idea of the ledger for the physical property, right? The idea that you've got this definitive source of information that can be used by multiple different technologies. Well, a good way to think about this is the way that is the examples that at least AI provided. So what they're trying to do is answer, their focus is on making every conversation just be a really, really great conversation with the prospects, right? So that means we're trying to give immediate correct information in response to every question that people ask us. And we know that, although most questions are quite routine that people get asked, it's what's your pet policy, what are the opening hours of the pool or something. To be really, really good, like better than you could do with a call center, you need to be able to answer even the sort of edge case questions that come up infrequently that require really specific information. So the examples that they give are, if somebody asks, does this apartment have another apartment above it? There's no place that you can go and find that information out right now unless you're familiar with the property. There's nothing in my PMS that tells me that specifically. I could intuit the information based on the numbers of the property, but in terms of definitively, no, this is the top floor of the building, or yes, it has an apartment above it. There's nowhere you could go find that information out right now. Ditto. How far is this apartment from the dog park? Right. So if you think about what you would need to know to figure that out, I need to know where the closest door is to, which door I would walk through to get from this apartment to the dog park, right? That means I have to be able to plot somebody's route through the corridor, through the door, out to the dog park, right? There's no point telling people, answering that question as the crow flies. Like, I have to know the physical layout of the
Right.
property in order to answer that question. Again, there's nothing that you have unless somebody's painstakingly typed documents that tell you this stuff. There's no information anywhere that tells you that. But an AI can figure that out, right? If you give an AI the layout of a property with all of the doors and all of the the pathways and all of the amenities and so on, an AI can figure out exact answers to those questions in real time. Even things like, will my king size bed fit in this second bedroom? Like questions like that. Again, imagine being in a contact center and being asked a question like that. You would probably have to ask somebody else in order to get an answer to that question. That means there's time that people have to wait to get that answer. Well, of course, an AI can just reason about all of those things by looking at the dimensions of the unit or looking at the routing from the unit to the amenity, or looking at the vertical layout of the building. And when you think about that, serving this objective of coming up with really good, reliable answers to all of the questions that somebody might ask when they're in the process of renting a property, it's not hard to think of how that would improve many different things that we do when we many of the things that we do in property management.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And this is maybe a little bit of a sidebar question, but the source of truth for what you just walked through, is that like a set of as-builts or MEPs that you get from an architect that are already, I mean, they were built in, I think, like a CAD, which is a digital program itself. Is that how they're feeding this information in, or is it
Uh,
something
yeah,
else?
so I think I mean you need. I mean, Engrain happens to be the company that I work with to do this, but you need what you need the company doing the Engrain part of this to do is to consume the detailed information about the properties, like whatever form the floor plans take, whether it's a bunch of PDFs, whether it's some sophisticated output from a CAD, I don't know, whatever form those things take, and
Got it.
convert them into this consistent digital record that has all of this information in it.
Got it. Okay. I just that was more a curiosity for myself than anything. Let's switch gears. I had to wear my Reba. That's not an endorsement of Reba necessarily. Anyway, I love the guys over at Reba, but I know we have a mutual friend. There are many mutual friends. Um, Donald Davidoff talks about something like days on market, I think is the way that he puts it, and a way to visualize that. Or the visualization of that being important in terms of informing decision making. Can you kind of unpack that? You tell a story in there as it relates to that.
Yeah, days on market is useful for all kinds of things, but one of the things, if you look at it from a revenue management perspective, it's a very good way of understanding if my price is too high or too low, right? So one of the challenges that you've got couple of different examples. One of the challenges you have in multifamily, we amenitize apartments to try and maximize revenue, but we have to figure out whether the price of this amenity package that we've put out into the market, whether the price is too high or too low for that, right? It's we've just redone the kitchens of these apartments, for example. We're going to apply an amenity charge of X dollars for those apartments. Is X dollars more or less than what people are willing to pay for the upgrade in quality? Well, a good way to understand that is you monitor the number of days between notice to vacate and the move in of the next resident, or it's either the move in or the or whenever you close the next lease. But it's basically the thing that measures how long that unit spends on market before somebody moves into it. And the idea is, if that number gets longer, right? So if you take the community, the properties, the units in the community that have the new amenity, and you compare it to all of the other units, is the number of days on market getting longer for the new units with the upgrade? If that's the case, it usually means that your price is too high, right? There's no reason, because all of the other factors are sort of held constant. There's no reason why it should be taking longer to rent an apartment just because it's got a new kitchen in it. The reason it's taking longer is probably to do with the fact that you've overpriced it. So by looking at by looking at the change in behavior, you've basically got a proxy for how is the market responding to this new thing that I put out in the market. When you overlay that onto things like onto visualization, which people are increasingly doing, is it taking longer or shorter to rent these apartments? Well, imagine looking at a building. If you've got a high rise, you've got many different floors, like in that building, right? So, are you noticing there's a different days on market pattern with the lower floor units than the higher floor units? Well, that means you've probably misjudged the delta between the lower floors and the higher floors. So it's a very similar thing to the amenity thing that we talked about, right?
Yeah.
So if you see that this is moving, this tower is moving very slowly, or these units in this tower are moving very slowly, then it can tell you what it is that you need to do in terms of pricing. It's particularly useful in lease ups. So again, lease ups, you're learning as you go about the building. You've got interesting, particularly if you get into like high rise, you've got very interesting dynamics in that because you're introducing chunks of units at a time. You generally tend to want to make your mistakes on the lower floors, not the upper floors, right?
Right.
So it's really, really helpful to look at things like days on market in terms of how they vary in a building. It can tell you what's right and what's wrong about your revenue strategy. You don't want the high units to lease too quickly, because that means you've underpriced them. You don't want the lower floors to lease too slowly, because those are the ones you don't want to be left with at the towards the end of the lease up. So it just provides this whole dimension into revenue strategy that you wouldn't have by just looking at the recommendations from like a revenue management system, for example.
Definitely. I think it's interesting in the sense that, and I know I'm like this. I'm very visual in nature. Some people can look at a spreadsheet and they can spot a formula error without, just they can see the number and they know what the formula error is, but they sort of think analytically. But I think when you combine that kind of insight, the analytical insight, along with the visual, it's just a much more compelling story and gets you to an answer, I think, much more quickly. This is not an indictment of anybody, but we bought a property. My last position, we bought a property from an operator. They were a developer, and to your point, if they had the visual tool, they wouldn't have done this. But they had a stack of units. They were the most premium units on the property, corner units, first floor to fifth floor, sixth floor. Those were the first 6 units that they let lease out of the building, and all at the same rate, right? Mm-hmm. You just missed an opportunity there. And if you had a visualization tool, maybe, you might have.
Another example that I was going to give is so things like long-term vacant units. Right. So again, if I'm looking at days on market, I can start to spot units that are problematic, right? That are taking longer to rent than the rest. What you tend to find is if you're not looking at this on a map, you're just looking at it in terms of like pricing recommendations, for example. You tend to try and solve problems like that through pricing, right? Okay, this is moving slowly. Let's discount the price. When you look at it on a map, you can spot that there may be, your problem might not be with price. Your problem might be with the fact that, okay, this unit is not on the tour route that the leasing agents take people through. It takes a golf cart to get from this unit to the from the from the office to this unit. Now that's in a garden style community. That's not a deal breaker because the resident doesn't have to come through the office to get to their unit, right? They can probably park somewhere closer to that unit, so it's absolutely not an issue. But the fact that it's difficult to tour for a prospect means that fewer and fewer prospects are getting to see that specific unit. And so your problem is with your leasing, like your sales process, not with the price. It might be a perfectly desirable unit in a really nice part of the property, but it's just a pain to get to on a tour. So too few prospects see it for it to lease quickly. Again, narratives like that become really obvious when you look at, if all my long-term vacant units are in places that are a golf cart ride away from the office, then I know that my problem is not with pricing. My problem is with getting people to just show these units to more people.
Yeah, it's interesting as you were saying that. It was coming to mind that if you see those days vacant in the visualization, can you also lay in, I guess, multiple data points? To use the example, you were just like leasing consultant not going to show this particular unit. Can you lay that into days vacant only shown one time versus 10 times? Or does that make sense? So that it's beyond. In my
Absolutely.
head, it's a
I
little
mean,
bit beyond
Donald.
pricing sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, Donald talks about a couple of examples, but they're thinking about this in terms of business intelligence, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
BI, the idea is you're trying to make it as easy as possible to be as specific as possible about anything you want to analyze, right? Well, now
Yeah.
because you can bring the map into your whatever dashboard or whatever report you build in your BI app, you can now see whatever you want in the context of a building. So what you say is a really good example. Is the thing I'm trying to find out, what is the number of tours, or what's the correlation between the number of tours and
Yes.
days on market?
Mm-hmm.
That's really that might be a really, really good thing that stops you from, first of all, reduces the number of days that these units are vacant, but also stops you from making unnecessary discounting decisions about those units. And they can pay for themselves very very quickly. It's and I mean, it's not just the new leases, it's renewals as well. So one of the examples that we talked about was when companies start to look at renewal rates across the property, not simply in terms of the overall retention number or the overall renewal rate, but where the renewals are high and low in the
Yeah.
property. You can see things like if there's a noisy neighbor in one part of the building, you can see the pattern of higher than expected move outs around them, or notice to vacate stuck around them. And again, that then means you can do something about that problem. Because again, if I look at the average across a property, I might think of it in broad terms, in terms of, we need to get our leasing conversations better. We need to do a better job of renewal pricing. You think about things about at a broad like process level, but those things might be fine. It's just there's some resident that you'd be better off without in the property, who's making life miserable for their neighbors, right? And again, the key to that is what what one of the respondents just referred to as spatial analytics, just understanding what the geographical context is of these data trends that I'm seeing.
I just came to mind that we'll have noise decibel sensors in every apartment from now on, so we can anticipate how that's impacting the broader audience.
You can measure it. You can learn stuff. I mean, I think it was in the paper, but another really good example was to some area of some really nice property where again there were high move outs or relatively high move outs and no obvious reason why why people didn't like this, didn't seem to like this part of the building, and so that caused this asset manager, whoever it was, just go to the property and just walk around that area. And what they found was that there was a playground, like there's a playground right outside the window. So there were just loads of kids making a lot of noise at some particular time of the day. So they moved they just made the decision to move the playground someplace where it wasn't close to like a load of windows, and they put a little garden or some trees or something where the playground was, and that solves the problem. But again, you wouldn't, you'd probably reach for the wrong lever if you hadn't noticed those units are all on this one particular side of the building.
Yeah, that's there's so many examples. Like even going back to the air conditioners that are sitting in the sun, it's a lot of times, unless you need to be triggered. Maybe that's the wrong word, but triggered to prompted. Let's say prompted. You're prompted by the data to go and do something like walking around. It goes back to an age-old principle of business management, and that is management by walking around or wandering around and actually going and seeing things, getting out of your comfortable chair in your office and seeing things. I want to bring us to a close, but I want to maybe get your sense, 5-10 years down the road, or maybe technology is advancing at a pace much more rapid than that. Where do you see this sort of bleeding edge? Where do you see the bleeding edge of this kind of technology, and how maybe it's colliding with AI, it's colliding with lots of other technologies? What do you see coming up for the future?
Yeah, it's exactly the right question to be thinking of, because there are sort of two ways to look at this. One is maps are really useful and they're showing up in lots of different applications, and that's going to keep getting more and more. You're going to see that more and more. That's one way of looking at it. The other way, though, is that maps are just unifying, the thing that unifies all these different processes, right? So if Jindo was talking about I think he was talking about the routing of maintenance people around properties. Well, people are increasingly going to be trying to figure out ways to centralize maintenance. So that means somebody who's maybe not quite as familiar with the layout of this garden style community is going to be coming to this community to do work one day. It's going to become increasingly helpful to tell them where to park, what door to walk through, like what their route is to get to a particular thing or a particular apartment. So routings are really useful. You've also got routings for things like self-guided tours, right? Those are increasingly, Chirp is a wonderful example, the one that we use in the paper. They've built some very cool sort of wayfinding capabilities into that application. But all of this stuff is sort of collecting information on how people get around properties. Well, there's lots of different potential uses for that information, right? It's really useful. It would be really useful to train an AI on how people flow around a property, because there's lots of questions that you would ask. If I know about how people make their way around a property when they're doing a tour, that's information that's useful when I'm conversing with somebody about how to get from A to B in a property, right? So and my maintenance routing. So if we go back to the Kairos example, Kairos knows what all these sensors are around a property. Well, that information is also useful to the person that's coming to do maintenance at the property. So the opportunity with all these things is to sort of use the map like a ledger, right? So the idea, the ledger for the physical property. So all of this information that all of this software is like generating about, how where stuff is and how people get around these properties, that's all data that can serve lots of different experiences, like experiences that you enable through software. So like I said, the one way to look at it is maps are useful and they're showing up in more and more places. I think the bigger picture way to look at it is maps are unifying more and more things about the way that we do property management and the way that we deliver resident experiences. and on that basis, I don't see how the big property management systems don't start baking this stuff deeper and deeper into their platforms. Because
Yeah,
if I'm a Yardi or a RealPage or an Appfolio or an Entrada, there aren't sources of information that are rich enough to support some of the use cases that we talk about within their systems right now. Like, so using you're using this digital representation of the property as a way of that they do so many different things, these applications, using the digital representation of the property to sort of unify the different things that their platforms are doing, and ultimately having really sophisticated AI, not just AI that converses with people, but AI that helps
sure.
organize maintenance, AI that that helps resident inquiries, this kind of stuff. I don't I don't see how this doesn't end up getting baked like deeper and deeper into their platforms, because in an AI enabled world, you don't want to be dependent on data that people keyed into the system. Like, you
That's
don't
right.
want records that were you don't want to train AI with records that were created by humans, like typing stuff into the system. You want AI to go to the most precise and fullest source of information you can. And in the case of the physical world, as we've seen with Uber, with any travel booking site and so on, that's all about locations which are best handled by maps.
Yeah, that's right. I think so. Last question, and then maybe tell people where they can find the paper. Certainly, we'll link it all up in the show notes. But if you were advising a property management company who is like at ground zero, what should they do first? Who should they engage with first to kind of talk through how they digitize or use mapping technology in their organization?
Yeah, I think so I think for most companies, your access to this is through vendors, right?
Sure.
So I think for me it would increasingly be a part of the way that I evaluate software that I'm considering buying. What how are you dealing with, do you offer maps that reflect my property?
Yeah.
When I implement your maintenance app, is there going to be this digital representation of my map that's going to make it easier? We use the example of the digital make ready board.
Yeah,
You and I
that's right.
have investigated this with in the real world over the years, but it
That's
is
right.
surprising how many make ready boards are still on whiteboards right now. So do
True
you
statement.
simply give me the ability to put my physical assets into your application so that you can show me my make ready board in real time on my phone or on my iPad or whatever it is? If that's something that you're looking for, and I think increasingly it should be, that's something that I would be looking at the time when I consider which maintenance vendors I would be using. I would definitely be. Marketing is fascinating because I think the real question with websites is the one that we asked in the previous white paper, which is, if you're thinking about how you want your property websites to work, it's like the question is not so much just do I want unit level search on my site. It's more like, do I want the only place where I can get unit level search to be an ILS? Right. If
Mhm.
I think about the value of having unit level search, and not just on my website, but just generally in my marketing, do I want, for example, a self-guided tour experience where I get to, the person coming to tour is looking at exactly the same map that they looked at when they were selecting the property that they wanted to come tour? Like, do I want complete unity between those two experiences, so it makes complete sense to me as a resident when I show up and I open the app on my phone and I'm looking at exactly the same thing that I was looking at when I was doing my search? Are things like that important to you? In that case, you're now looking for vendors that are using the same stuff in their applications. Yeah, so we know as we used a bunch of examples in the paper, so we know that the vendors are doing this right now. If you like this this idea, this experience, that you think this is the direction things are going in, always look at the vendors that are doing this and make your own decision on what kind of improvement I think it delivers to the experiences I'm trying to deliver.
Definitely. Well, Dom, I know the paper is packed full of very specific examples, very specific vendor suppliers who offer this technology. Certainly, there are others in the marketplace, but to your point, just asking those questions and being inquisitive as it relates to how they're using that technology, or not, or if it's on the roadmap or not, would certainly be valuable. But Dom, I always enjoy our conversations. I look forward to all of your papers. I pull them off, print them off immediately, and stop what I'm doing and read them. No joke. But I always find them deeply insightful and certainly prompting of like thoughts and ideas about our industry. So thank you for. I know that's a tremendous amount of effort. So thank you for putting all that effort into making a good quality product each time.
Well, thank you for reading. It's always good to hear when somebody does. But
Yeah.
there's plenty more where that came from. It's going to be a busy fall for me.
Definitely. Well, as we sort of close up here, is where can people find? We'll link it up, but where can they find the paper and reach out to you if they want to?
Yeah, probably the quickest way is just to go to the homepage of 20for20.com. So it's 20for20.com. And just scroll down, you're going to see the big button that has Visual Revolution is the name of the white paper. You'll see a big button for it on there. Just click that and it'll take you to the download page.
Excellent. And people can reach out to you on LinkedIn. I imagine you're all over LinkedIn.
Yeah, and then I tend to try and maintain a presence on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dom.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Multifamily Collective. I feel like this week's guest on the Multifamily Collective needs no introduction. His reputation rather, precedes him out in the multifamily space, especially on LinkedIn, where he is very actively involved. But Dom Beveridge, the principal at 20for20, has released a new white paper. It's called Visual Revolution, How Digital Mapping is Unifying Multifamily Experiences in Data Analysis. Now, Dom and I caught up and we talked about this paper, and we tried to share, or Dom tried to share, based on my prompts and hopefully fairly good questioning, with very specific stories about how this technology, visualization and digitization, mapping, if you will, the interior spaces in communities at large, how that is benefiting organizations out in the marketplace, how that technology is being administered and baked into several of the offerings, several vendor supplier offerings in the space today, and how it could really revolutionize multifamily as we move forward. A lot of this is based on sensor technologies, but a lot of it is based on other types of technologies that are baked into an overarching platform. We name some names. We certainly draw from the industry as it relates to stories that you can take away. You can take away actionable items that you can incorporate into your own organization, your own business, and hopefully create more efficiency, more effectiveness. You can use data to make more well-informed decisions. And by visualizing that data, you can make them potentially more rapidly. So as it is tradition, grab your favorite beverage today. I am that sounds weird. I am consuming branded from Free Reign Coffee. This has become my favorite coffee brand, and branded is a fantastic blend to pick up. So with that being said, please enjoy this well-rounded conversation with Dom Beveridge.